Okay, so my name is Bramus. I'm a developer from Belgium, as Christian already mentioned. I do backend, I do frontend. I'm more passionate about frontend and especially the CSS part. CSS is an amazing language. It's why we are all here, I guess, because we are interested in it. And the advancements in CSS have been amazing. Like what happened the past few years and what's coming next for CSS. It's amazing stuff. All the things that we will be able, that we can do and will be able to do with CSS. It's a great improvement. I run a blog too. It's bram.us. I did some counting earlier this year. Apparently, it's the 20th anniversary in November. So I have to come up with a party or something like that, I guess. And on my blog, I collect some random stuff, like some things that I like a small video about a robot or something, but also, of course, front-end stuff, some back-end stuff too. But nowadays, it's mainly front-end stuff. You can subscribe to it using RSS or follow it on Twitter too if you want, on Bramus blog, if that's more easy for you. So what I do on there is I collect some links to interesting things, but I also write my own posts on there. I label these original content. That's a separate category. And two of these posts are these right here. These are on scrolling animations. And well, you don't have to visit them now because everything I'm about to tell you is included in these posts. So these posts, they form the basis for this presentation. But you can check them out afterwards if you want. I will share the links, no worries about that. So everything is in there. They took quite some time to write. If I'm not mistaken, like the first one, it has about 200 revisions before I hit publish. And those were quite a few long nights that I was just typing and trying things out and building demos, because what I'm about to show you is really amazing stuff. I find it personally. The things that we can do with scrolling animations, it's mind-blowing. Fair warning though, everything you see here is highly experimental. It's based on a draft that has not been approved. Like for example, if you go to caniuse.com, it's all red. If you look up scrolling animations, it's all red. No browser has any support except for Chromium. So if you use Chromium 89, you can enable a feature flag for that, and then you can try it out. Of course, do know it's subject to change. Like the demos that I made originally, they used one syntax, and by now the syntax has changed. So yeah, it's kind of quirky. Don't use it in production, but don't let that stop you, because I don't see this like as a experimental feature, everything will break. I'm like really excited about this, because what I'm about to show you are all hardware accelerated animations linked to scroll running off main thread. So on the compositor with no JavaScript needed at all. If you can't picture that, well, here's a simple recording. This is a demo that I made. I'm about to show you later in this presentation. And this includes no JavaScript at all. It's a cover flow, which you might remember from iTunes back in the day. Like the very, very early versions of iTunes, they had it also on the iPhone, but they removed it a few years ago. And it has the covers so that you can scroll through them. So this uses scroll snapping. This uses CSS animations. So like the covers themselves, they are rotated a bit in depth. And then using the scroll linked animations, we make it so that they have the correct position in the center. Now you can see some glitches here. I don't know if it's visible via the session here, but you can see some small glitches. Again, this is highly experimental stuff. The support is only in Chromium behind the feature flag, so it's not perfected yet, but this should give you an idea about what we can do with it. So that was the intro, scrolling animations with CSS scroll timeline. Before I explain like a scrolling animation, well, before I continue, I perhaps have to explain what is a scrolling animation. So I've made a small comparison. So on the left here, you see a scrolling animation demo. And if I click this button here, then I will virtually scroll through the page. So if I do that, if I scroll down on the page, you see the content slides up. And if I scroll back up, the content slides down, and you see my scroll thumb also move. But what's also here visible is a scroll bar. So this scroll bar, or this progress bar, I should say, this progress bar here at the top This one is directly linked through to the scroll position. So if I scroll up or if I scroll down, you can see that the animation, which is running, it responds immediately to my scroll position. So this is something that is linked to the scroll offset of the scroll container. Don't confuse this with the thing on the right. These are scroll triggered animations, and these are animations that run once they reach a certain threshold. A typical example is these fly-in kind of animations. So you scroll down the page and then the content flies in. But if you stop scrolling, or if you scroll a little bit back up or down, you can't stop the animation. The animation is already running. So I've put in a reversal here. So if I time it correctly, like you see that I'm scrolling back up and then the animation isn't perfectly linked to the scroll position. It's triggered by scroll. Typically, you'd implement these using an intersection observer, difficult word for me to pronounce apparently, and you need JavaScript for it. So what the specification covers is a thing on the left. It's only the scroll linked animations which are covered by the specification, not the scroll triggered animation. So what are they? Well, they are animations based on the scroll progress of a scroll container. And again, here is the demo. Don't worry, the slides will be put online. Also, all the demos are on CodePen. So if you type in my name on CodePen, you should see some collections with all these demos included. And CSS Café themselves, they will also share it on the Meetup page. So no worries about that. So these scroll linked animations, back to it. Well, a typical demo is the progress bar, which I've just shown you. So take a look here at the top, and also take a look here on the right to my scroll position. So if I scroll down the page, the progress bar goes from 0 to 100%, and then it goes back up. And as you can see here at the top, no JavaScript, only CSS. I'm not cheating. I'm not using any external resources either. So I'm not cheating here. It's only pure CSS. So let's take a look at the code. How do we make it? Well, there are three components that you need for a scroll linked to make a scroll linked animation. And the first one is a regular CSS animation. So for our progress bar, we've positioned it at the very top. And then we say like, okay, by default, we're going to scale exit to 0. So we're going to like scale it down so that you can't see it. And then the end position is scale x1, which is 100%. So it's entirely visible. And then here on line 15, we link this animation to our element ID progress bar, and we make it run. So if you only have this little piece here, so the keyframes and the animation, if I would open the page, the animation would start without me scrolling. So what do we need to add? Well, we need to add the second thing. This is the scroll timeline. In the scroll timeline, you see it here, it's at scroll dash timeline. You give it a name, progress bar timeline, and then you add some descriptors in there. I will cover them later. But do know the fact that this is 1 second and the animation duration is only also 1 second. That's not a coincidence. That's an explicit choice, and I will cover it on one of the next slides. So what is this scroll timeline? Well, the scroll timeline says like, hey, if you want to run the animation, don't run by the tick of a clock. Like a clock, it ticks 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, 4 seconds, and that clock defines where you are in the animation. With scroll timeline, you say, hey, we don't need the clock. We are going to link it to scroll. And what you can do there is basically say, like, hey, if I scroll from the top of my page to the very bottom of the page, how much time should that make up for? So if I scroll from 0 to 100%, that should last, which using the example here, 1 second. If I scroll from the top to the bottom, my animation should go to 1 second. And then the third thing that we need, well, we need to link them up both. So we have a new CSS property for that. It's called animation timeline. And then we refer to our scroll timeline from step 2 using its name. And these three things, well, these are like the whole essential thing behind the demo that you just saw. This is the entire code. Yes. So these descriptors, time range was one which was included in the example, but we have 3 more, and I will cover them one by one. So first of all, this time range thing. I have told you this time range thing. It's a number. Well, it's a duration. It's 1 second, which was the value, which expresses how much time should advance if we scroll from the start of our container to the end of our container. And I'll just show you using an example. Say we have an animation duration of 1 second, and say that we have a time range of 1 second. So these two are have the same value. If we scroll for a distance of 0%, our animation will be at 0 seconds, at 0%, and time will have advanced by 0 seconds. So if I scroll virtually to the very bottom of the page to 100%, then our animation will be at 100% as our clock will have advanced for 1 second. And this is the time range property that determines that. If I go back and if I say like, okay, I want advanced time by 2 seconds. If I scroll from 0 to 100%, that will mean if I scroll, and I'm at 50% halfway, well, our animation is already at 100% because we control the time here. We say like, if we scroll from top to bottom, that should take 2 seconds. So if we're halfway, we already are at 1 second, and our animation here at the top is already complete. And then the last part of the scrolling, yeah, that doesn't have any effect anymore. You can also do the other thing around it. If you want, like you say, time range 1 second, our animation duration lasts 2 seconds. And if you're quick with this, well, then you will know, like if I scroll to 100%, our time will have advanced from 0 to 1 seconds. But since our animation lasts 2 seconds, it will only be halfway at 50%. So this time range thing, don't confuse it with like the actual ticking of a clock. Just think of it as a number. How much time should progress when I scroll from the start of my container to the very end of my container? My piece of advice here is just keep them the same, because otherwise you will run into problems. So just keep them the same, then you will always notice like, hey, if I scroll from 0 to 100%, my animation will also go from 0 to 100% and it will be completed. Of course, you might have a reason to diverge from that, but the default rule is keep them the same. Then scroll offsets. Here's another demo. So take a look here at the background page, the background of this cover. It has a parallax effect. So if I scroll, then the background will move, and if I scroll back up, it will move back down. So this is a parallax effect. Again, using CSS. Now, how does the code look like? What does it look like? It looks like this. We have our scroll timeline here on the left. We have our time range of 2 seconds. Why 2 seconds? Well, our animation also lasts 2 seconds. So remember what I just said, keep them the same. Your animation duration and your time range, keep them the same. I did that here. And then we have our scroll offsets. And our scroll offsets say like, hey, if I scroll, I don't want to have the animation run. If I scroll from the top of the page to the very, very bottom of the page, I want to run the animation from 0, so here at the top, to 100 VH, so 1 page of scrolling. It's a bit too narrow, now you can see it. So I want the animation to be finished by the time that I have scrolled down 1 page, which is 100 VH in not all browsers, most browsers, 100 VH is 1 full page of scrolling. And then if I scroll like further down here, nothing happens, the animation has already completed. And now if I'm here and I scroll back up, it starts from 100% animation progress to 0% animation progress. So the scroll offsets, it's an array with certain key points that you want to trigger your animation on, well, where you want to have your animation run to. You could think of them like keyframes from the Flash days, long time ago. You can use it that way. Now you might be wondering, hey, there's also start and end here. Why is that? Well, this is a historical artifact. So the first version of the specification said, if you want to define your scroll offsets, you have to have a start offset and an end offset. They scrapped that now. So the syntax has been replaced by scroll offsets, which has as an extra advantage, you can define like more than 2 this way, because with start and end, you can only find a start and an end. With scroll offset, you can define more than 2. Why do I have both syntaxes in here? Well, the implementation in Chromium still uses the old syntax. But if you do a nightly build of Chromium, you have to use the new syntax. So yeah, I have to duplicate some code to make it work in all browsers. The cool part is the scroll offset thingy. You can leave it behind. I don't know if this one is editable. No, it's not. So if you don't define scroll offsets, the default will be if you scroll from 0 to 100%, which is from 0, the top of the page, 100%, entirely to the bottom of the page. So these are the scroll offsets. Then we have two more, orientation and source. The orientation is like, hey, in which direction do you want to scroll? So by default, we have a vertical scrolling. You can change that to a horizontal scrolling, to a horizontal scroll container. You can also use the logical keywords for it. So inline and block. So the inline dimension is by default the horizontal one, and the block dimension is by default the vertical one, unless you start flipping things around. And then source, that's another descriptor that you can use. That one defines like, hey, what is a scroll container that you want to take a look at? By default, it's a document itself, so the entire document, the entire page, but you can override that if you want. And here's an example. Like, okay, I scroll down, there's no progress bar here, but there is a progress bar here in a small gallery. And if I now scroll in a horizontal way, you can see that the progress bar also moves. This also has some scroll snapping in there to make the photos visible. Another thing right here, like here we have 3 photos. 1, this is 2, 3, and 2, 1, and we go back. First, let's take a look at the markup. What does it look like? So we have a gallery here, which is the entire wrapper. So here the entire thing. And in there, we have at the top of the gallery, you have the progress bar, so the red line. And then in there, we also have it's up to here. Yeah, it's up to here. We also have the scroll container. And then inside each scroll container, we have entries, gallery entry 1 and gallery entry 2. And then we have the same for the other gallery, but then we have 3 entries in there. So remember a gallery inside the progress bar, in there the scroll container 2, and then in the scroll container we have the entries. What does the CSS look like? So we have just the gallery here, position relative. That way we can position absolute the progress bar, the top of the gallery itself. Then the gallery scroll container, it has an overflow X scroll, so the horizontal direction, with scroll snapping in there too, so that it snaps very nicely. And then display flags direction row is to lay out the children next to each other. And then the entries, yeah, some scroll snap line here, yeah. And then the good part, or the cool part, how does it look like? Our keyframes, again, is it transformed from scale X 0 to scale X 1? It's not the 0, I'm going to correct that. And then we have here our scroll timeline. So our source for our first timeline is this div with this ID. So to use a source, to define the source, you have to use a selector function. And then the selector function itself, it requires an ID. So you have to give your element an ID there on the page. So this div right here with the elements in there is ID scroll container, a gallery 1 scroll container. And then our orientation is set to inline, which now here translates to horizontal because I'm using a top-down, left to right kind of layout. And then our time range 1 second. And then we hook it up to our progress bar. Now, since we have 2 photos here, and by default we have the first photo visible, I start at the scale X of 0.5, so it's halfway visible. And then we link our animation timeline, again, using the name. Now, since this selector function, it requires you to pass in an ID, you have to duplicate your code. So I have scroll timeline for the first one, but I also have a scroll timeline for the second one. And the only difference between these two is the ID that I pass into the scroll timeline function. I filed an issue for that at the CSS working group GitHub repository, or the CSS working group issues repository from W3C, it is, I guess. I filed an issue there like, yeah, is there a way to solve this? Because I don't like want to duplicate my timelines because they are essentially the same, except for the ID that I pass in there. And we're also the first is our progress bar for our second gallery. We start at photo 1 of 3, so we start at 33%. And that's it. I think that this one is editable, so I can, oh no, I can't edit it. Well, the next demos are editable. So yeah, and as a selection function, explicit ID, you can't reuse a code. I already said that. So these are the 4 descriptors. I hope that's a bit clear to everyone. So you can change the time range, how much time should progress when I scroll from top to bottom. You can change the scroll offsets, which is the distance that you are scrolling. Hey, I want to scroll from the top 0% to 100%, or like at a specific distance, 100 VH, for example. Then the orientation, you can change it from vertical to horizontal. Default is vertical. And then the source is which scroll container are you looking at? And by default, it is the document. So these 4 make up a scroll timeline. And it's only the first one, the time range, which is required. All the rest has defaults. So some more demos. Hey, what can we build with this? What can we do with this? Because, okay, the polar bear example is nice, but practical use cases. Here's the first one. This one has is a cover photo. It has a parallax effect, so the photo will slide up, but it will convert to a sticky header. So if I scroll, photo moves, and then it sticks as a header. You might see this a lot in mobile apps on your phone, where you like scroll and then the header sticks. I like this one. This was one of the first demos that I built with it. I love it. So what does it look like? We have our keyframes for the background. So we change the background position of this div right here. We also apply a background color on there. We set the height to 100 VH. So we want to scroll from 100 VH in height to have it like left at 10 VH in height there at the top. And then we also adjust the font size. So here it's a bit bigger, and then here the font size is a bit smaller. So this is our animation. And then we also have a scroll timeline, of course, which is here. Yes. So we have our time range set to 2 seconds. That is because our animation here is also 2 seconds. Hey, remember I said it, make your time range and your animation duration, make them the same value to make things easy. The scroll offsets, I've also changed them here from 0 to 90 VH, because since I have 10 VH left for the top bar, I don't want to scroll 100 VH, but I want to scroll like 90 VH, and then it nicely sticks for the remaining 10 VH, and then we scroll down. And this is the demo. There's also some hacking in there, like we couldn't use position sticky, because if you use actual position sticky in there, the height of the scroll container like changes, and then your animation will flicker as you scroll. It's really, you can try it out yourself if you want to change that to position sticky, and then you will see like your screen flipping because it needs to recalculate the height, and then it doesn't know the height. And the circular dependency you see there. Next demo, what can we also do? Anybody remember, knows what this one is? It's from a game. It's called Shep says hi. I'm just gonna change that. Like, let me see more faces here because I only see 8 of you. Wow. Yeah, now I see a lot of faces. Cool.
It's a great game.
So the next demo, this is from the Firewatch game, and it's a parallax header. So if I scroll, then you see this parallax effect where the background like moves slower than the foreground things. You can also see this small glitch right here. So this is also a thing that needs to be addressed in the rendering there. And you see the small line. I like it. Again, using only CSS. So what have I done here? I've created a scroll timeline. So I scroll for 100 VH. I gave it that name. Again, 1 second, and scroll offsets from 0 to 100 VH, so 1 page. And then for the parallax effect itself, every layer is given the parallax animation, and I've set it to translate by a certain offset. And what I did there is simply vary each offset per layer in there. So this way I can reuse my code. You see it right there. I can reuse my animation by simply changing the CSS custom property. And that's the effect right here. Another demo. Oh, this is a cool demo. This one was inspired from a demo by Adam Argyle at Argyle Inc. On Twitter. You should definitely follow him. He has lots of tweets about new and upcoming stuff to CSS. He works for Google. He also does a CSS podcast together with Una Kravitz. You should really follow him, and Una too, by the way, because when I saw this demo, so he had this demo here, and look at the slash. It moves if you switch panels. So he had this original demo with just the slashes right there. It was that demo that I saw, and I was like, ooh, what is this? I'm interested in this. And then, yeah, all the other demos that you see here are a result of that interest. First, let's take a look at the slash. So it turns, it makes a full turn per panel. Our scroll timeline. So if I scroll in my main element, so I don't scroll in the body, I scroll in the main element. Time range should advance by 1 second. Main element, which is this one right here. So we have a main containing all the section in there. So if I scroll in this main element, I want to rotate this slash right here, and I want to rotate it 3 turns. Why 3 turns? Well, this is page 1. So if I go to page 2, 1 turn, 2 turns, 3 turns. So I have to know like how much sections do I have? -1. That's the number of rotations that I want to do. And then we link it up using this scroll sections timeline. Now, what did I add in there? I added this little navigation here where you can move per page, and you also see like the line move. I think that's nice. So what did I do for that? Well, again, I've made an extra animation. Yes, I know, should animate left right here, but this was quick and dirty for the demo. I just wanted to move the line. 75%, again, we have 4 sections, but we are by default visible at section 1. So I have to move 75%, not 100%. And then here we also link the animation timeline to this element. So this demo right here, it's kind of already showing one of the powers behind this separate scroll timeline definition, because I only define one scroll timeline, but I reuse it for several animations, one for the slash and one for our little nav indicator. So yeah, cool demo. Thank you, Adam, for inspiring me. It was the basis for all of the other demos that you see here. Another note, by the way, I see it, my eye falls on it. Add supports, animation timeline works. Do note that all the demos, they have an add supports rule, which only activates the animations when your browser supports it. Another thing you might want to add in there is add prefers reduced motion. You don't always want to have animations run. If the user doesn't prefer to have them, then yeah, you can. It's best to leave them out. Next demo. This is the same demo as the previous one, except look at the top right here. The line, it moves a bit differently. So I have an underline per section right there, and if I go to section 2, so you see a line move, a line shrink, and then another line expand. Yeah, I like this one too. It's a bit more complicated though, because for every section that I have here, I have this underline, but then I have to trigger them at different key points, which means that well, I had to like define several scroll timelines, and then I had to do some calculations in there, like, hey, for each scroll sections, for the slash, use that one. But then for the first animation, it goes from 0 to 33%, and for the second one, 33, 66%. Weird stuff. Another nasty thing that I had to do right here is if I can I disable animation timeline? I think so. This one is editable. So I've disabled the CSS animation timeline. That's for the slash. I don't want to disable that one. I want to disable here the animation timelines on the navigation. So by default, the animation will run. It will start, collapse, and then it will expand to 100%. And let me put forwards in there that you see it. Oh yeah, oh, the animation does both. Yeah, sorry, I'm mistaken, apologies. So my animation, it does two things. One is expanding, and then the second thing the animation does is contracting again. And what I needed to do there is like, hey, but this first section, it's already halfway the animation state, because you start with the underline right there. What I did do is by default, I have a time range of 4 seconds because my animation also lasts 4 seconds. But then for the first child, I changed the animation duration for my scroll container to 2 seconds. And then I also shifted my animation by -2 seconds, so that my animation here for the first item, it starts 2 seconds before I have opened the page. And that way it's already halfway. It's a complicated mess. I don't recommend you to do this, because further down in the presentation, we will see a better solution using element-based offsets. But so yeah, this is a possibility that you can do right here, but it's 2 long evenings of thinking like, how will I do this? How can I do this? Oh, that's the way you do it. And then coming to the conclusion, yes, it's possible, but perhaps I shouldn't do it this way. But I simply wanted to show you, like, you can have several scroll timelines, and then apply them to individual elements if you want. Some other tips and findings that I found during my experiments with this. Well, it's not possible to use CSS custom properties as values for descriptors. So if I go back to my previous demo, like for example here, this time range, 4 seconds, 4 seconds, 4 seconds, and then 2 seconds, like, hey, can't you use a CSS custom property for it? No. So you can't do this. Time range 4s, and then use that here. That's not possible. This is something that I wanted to do automatically, but it's not allowed well, by CSS itself. It's something that's not supported in CSS, and it's quite logical why it's not, because these descriptors or these scroll timeline definitions, they are totally separate from the rest of your CSS of your running, so you don't have inheritance of your variables. Of your custom properties. So this is unfortunately not possible. Yeah, live with it. was the advice that I found by this. And then another thing, another tip is always set your animation timing function to linear. Why is that? Well, it's to keep this direct link between you scrolling and the animation progress. If you don't do that, things will become weird. Like for example, if you set your animation timing function to ease in, that will mean like if you scroll to 50%, your animation won't be at 50%. It will slow. It will be at 30% somewhere. And then only in the end, it will speed up. And that's quite weird. If you remember the progress bar, if you scroll halfway to a page, you want the progress bar to be halfway and not at 30%. And then for the last 50% of scrolling, like move for another 70%. So a tip there, always use linear. It works best. Of course, you might have a good reason to diverge from that. It's all fine, but by default, have it set to linear. So is this the end of this presentation? Well, no, it's not. Because the specification also defines a second thing, which is even more exciting and more mind-blowing. It's scrolling animations based on element offsets. So it doesn't run the animation based on a scroll offset, but it runs the animation based on the position of an element inside its scroll container. Think intersection observer, where you have this element which is about to appear into the viewport, and then you want to start something, and then as it slides out of the viewport, then you want to do something else. But you can do the same for CSS animations using only CSS, no JavaScript. So here's a demo. Look at the box. If it scrolls into the page, it's green, and if it's then out of the page, it's red again, green, and then it's red again. Well, using the CSS scrolling animations with an element-based offset, you can have an animation run while the element is green. So while it is intersecting, or also when it's entering or when it's leaving. I'll show you later on, no worries. Crazy stuff. For the record, I don't expect you to understand all of this after this one presentation. It took me many weeks and late night evenings to really grasp it. But I hope I've summarized it for you and that it will become a bit clear for you. So an example, just show you an example. Again, the polar bear with the photo, and here we have the photo entering. And as I scroll over the page, you see it appearing. Let me show you a bit of debug. So the animation, it starts when this green line, the top of the box, touches the scroll port, then the animation starts. And when it is done, like when the bottom edge touches the top of the scroll port, the animation is at 100%. And this clipping is done using a clip, like a clip path. So I clip path from the center, and then we clip path to inset to 000. So it's like a curtain opening. Again, only CSS, no JavaScript. Yes, I do know there's a bit of data loss here because you never see the whole photo. You can only see the photo when it's already off screen, but we will solve that in the next demo. So how does it work? Well, let's just think in pseudocode. Let's not look at real code. What we basically want to do is hey, scroll timeline. When our box is at the bottom edge of the scroll port, then I want to start my animation. So when this red box, it touches the bottom of the scroll port right here, then I want to start my animation. And it needs to finish when the box is above the top edge of the scroll port. So when the red box is sitting on top of the scroll port. So it touches and then it sits on top, by then it should be done. So that's our pseudocode. We need two scroll offsets for that. What does it look like in real code? This is the code. It says scroll offsets. Again, we have two, our from offset and our to offset. And the first one says, hey, take a look at target. Target, oh, that's the box right there. When it is touching at the end edge of the scroll port, so here we have a scroll port with our little scroll bar, and then where it starts, we call this the start edge, and then we call this thing right here the end edge. Now for a horizontal scroll container, the start edge will be at the left and the end edge will be at the right, but for a vertical one, the start edge is at the top and then the end edge is at the bottom. And then the third thing we have is a number. And this is a threshold, and it indicates how much is our element, our target, intersecting into the scroll port. If you know intersection observer, you already know this, because 0 means not intersecting outside of the box. But if you change it to 1, it is entirely intersecting. So if I say selector target and 0, it means at the bottom edge, not inside of the scroll port. And when do I want my animation to finish? Well, I want it to finish when it's at the start edge, not intersecting. So start edge, not intersecting, that is right here. And this is the actual code from the demo you saw just with the image reveal. The animation starts at the bottom when it sits at the bottom, and it stops, it's finished when it's entirely out of view. So we have these three things here: target, edge, threshold. You can combine these things. What we have here is end 0 to start 0. So let me just check that. End 0 to start 0. It means, hey, when our green little target box, when it's touching the end edge, not in view, because it's 0% intersecting, so it's entirely out of view, and it should run to start 0, which is right here. So during the green line that you see here, our animation will run there. So it will start here, and it will finish when the box is sitting there. Now we can combine this. We can say, hey, if I wanted to start at end 1, which means at the end edge, so the bottom edge, 1 is 100% intersecting, so our box will be sitting right here. And then I want it to run, like, for example, to start 1. So that means when our element is entirely in view, then the animation will start. The animation will finish by the time that the box is appearing right there. And you can combine these, like end 0, start 0. We saw this intersecting the scroll port. End 1, start 1. That's this one right here, in between the scroll port edges. But you can also do like, okay, I want to go from end 0 to end 1, which means the animation will run when the element is entering the scroll port. Or you can say start 1 to start 0 when the element is leaving the scroll port. So then you can trigger your animations. You can't do this. Start 0, end 0. By default, that's not possible. There is an exception if your element is bigger than your scroll port, then it is possible. But by default, it's not. So we have these typical combinations right here. These 4, by default, these 4 should be enough because we can build some cool stuff with that, as shown in the next demo. Oh, well, first another demo. I told you about the data loss, like where we have this issue where if we scroll our animation, we have some data loss of the image. Well, I've changed it here. I say like, hey, I want to start our animation when it is halfway in the view. So it's at the end edge, 50% intersecting. And I want the animation to be complete when the image is at the end section, 100% in view. So when it is sitting at the bottom. If I do this, so now it's 50% in view, our animation starts. And by the time our element is sitting at the bottom, so on the end edge, 100% inside of the scroll port, our animation is completed. So, and this is a much nicer image reveal than the previous demo that we had. Let me show debug on. So here you can see the container of the image itself. And that's, yeah, that's much, much better. I have a second image also in there. Again, the second image is using a different scroll timeline because our selector function requires to pass in an ID. So the top image is image 1, and this one here is image 2. Yeah, I think that's cool. So I told you, like, hey, we can combine these. What if we go from end 0 to end 1? End means the bottom edge. 0 means 0% intersecting with the scroll port. So the element is sitting right underneath the scroll port. And then end 1 means, again, the end edge, 100% intersecting with the scroll port. So it is visible in the scroll port. So this combination right here says, hey, when the element is entering the scroll port, run the animation. Take a look here at the bottom. If I scroll up, you see these list items appear. Yay! I like this. And then if you scroll back up, they disappear again. Now, I must tell you something again. These here, they require an ID, and IDs must be unique. But since I have like several list items in there, I have to create a scroll timeline for every scroll item. And yes, this is the CSS. It has a scroll timeline for list item 1, list item 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 7, 8. I didn't type this all manually. I wrote a little script for that. I also filed a blog like for a selector thing, like, hey, can't I just reuse my scroll timeline for that? In some of the demos, you will see a small JavaScript tab here, and that contains the code like to generate the CSS, and then I copy the CSS that was generated and paste it in there. Now you might be wondering, like, hey, well, if we can slide in some contacts in this list, can we also slide them out? Yes. Look at the top here. So if they leave the scroll port, which is start 1, start 0. So take a look at the top edge when it's 100% intersecting. So it's sitting against the top, and then 0% intersecting the second one, it's sitting just outside of the scroll port. And since we can attach multiple animations to one single element, well, we can also, of course, like attach multiple scroll timelines to one single element. So at the top here, they move out, but at the bottom here, they move in. Yay! No JavaScript. Yay! This is what I told you about, the little script we generated. So I have a generate CSS thing here. I check for all the LIs. I generate a little bit of CSS, and then, well, I injected it, but what I did is I console log it, and then I copy it, and I pasted it into here. I think this is cool, because this will like give us the ability to create some native-like animations that you see in a native app. Pretty cool stuff. Horizontal scroll section. Ooh, this one is cool. It's based on a demo. I forgot the name of the person. It's at the bottom. It's based on another demo, which you might have seen, which uses GSAP scroll trigger. So GSAP scroll trigger, GSAP is like the animation library for animating SVGs. And then recently they published a scroll timeline library to do exactly what's possible here with CSS scroll timeline. So every GSAP scroll timeline demo that you see, feel free to fork it and then remake it using only CSS. That's perfectly possible. It's also what I did here with this demo. We have a page, and there's this horizontal section in there that moves as you scroll down. So this is the horizontal section here. And now I'm still scrolling down. I'm not scrolling horizontally. I'm just scrolling down, 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 down. And then at the end, and then if I scroll back up, it moves back. Only CSS, folks. Woo! How is it built? Okay, so here's the original. Cameron Knight, he made that one, the original demo. It's one of the popular plans every now and then. This is all his CSS, so I just left that in place. But then here I added some extra things. First, perhaps let's take a look at the HTML. So we have a section here at the top. The warning that shouldn't be visible. Yes, so we have 3 sections. We have that one section here at the very top. This is this one. Then we have a second section in there. Let me just put a line break in there. Then we have the third section at the very bottom, which contains like the information. And then this section pin, this is the special one because it contains the horizontal strip. So the horizontal strip is the spin wrap thing, and then the section pin is the section around it. And what did we do? Well, we expanded it. We created some scroll estate. If I look it up here, the section pin, I gave it a height. The section spin size times 4, yeah, it's like, this is 300 VH. That's what this line says. I used some CSS custom properties in there. So what I did is I expanded the section pin to have some scroll state so that I can scroll. And what my scroll timeline then does is, well, it takes a look at, hey, if you are scrolling inside the body, so I'm scrolling inside of the body, the entire page, this one could be omitted, right? Because it's a default document element, is the default scroll container. But then I hooked up the scroll section and I say like, hey, even though we are scrolling inside of the body, don't look at the scroll position of the body. Look at the position of this section pin element. When its start edge is, when it is at the start edge of our scroll container, so right here, 1 means 100% visible, then start our animation, and the animation is the horizontal sliding, and then be finished by the time our section pin is sitting at the end edge. So here at the bottom, again 100% in view, which is right here. And then run our animation. This should be a semicolon, by the way. It's a wrong copy and paste. Yeah, I'll fix it later on. Then here's the transform. So remove the element minus 100% plus 100 VH. It moves nicely. I also used some position sticky in there, like to make the pin wrap, so the contained strip, to make it stick inside of the expanded section pin. And then here we hook our animation. So I think this demo is really cool, because what we are doing here is we are looking at one thing, our body, but we are not looking at that scroll position. We are looking at the position of section pin in there. So that's the second thing. And we are not animating section pin. No, we are animating the pin wrap. So that's the third thing. And this kind of like made the whole puzzle click for me. Because you might be wondering, like, hey, okay, why do we need this scroll timeline? Can we have like just an extra animation property, like to add it in here? Well, no, because it becomes very, very much complicated. Because if you had to define all of that in an animation property, that would be like a long, very long line, or lots of properties. So I think this demo is really, really a really cool example. Look at the body, scroll in the body, look at the section pin, and animate something else. Cool stuff. One thing you might have seen though, there's a small bug in here. So if I scroll down, everything is okay. And here the animation is done. But when I scroll now back up, you can see a small glitch. So I don't know if that's visible, like the frame rate perhaps on the stream won't be that good. But there's like the small glitch when the animation is reversing, going in reverse. Right at the very start, you see the first frame, and then it corrects itself to like show it at the correct position. Again, a Chromium bug, because this is all highly experimental. If you do happen to like to experiment with all this with scroll timeline, and if you encounter a bug, please file one, because this the folks at Chromium / Blink, they weren't aware of this until somebody, I in this case, pointed it out to them. So if you encounter some bugs, feel free to create issues, crbug.com, and then you can file an issue on there. And they will be very happy with your bug report. So cool. This is this demo, the horizontal scroll section, only CSS. I like it. Then cover flow. Let me just cheat a little bit. I'm going to hit to the middle. So this is the demo that I've shown you at the very beginning of the stream. Yeah. Let me just move this around here. So we have a unordered list, all with covers. We have list items in there, and then inside of the list items we have the images. And what do we do? Well, it's a bit tricky. So you can see here in green outlined, that is the unordered list, the UL. And then here in blue, it's a bit behind it, we have our list items. But we don't animate the list items. We animate the images inside. So the image here inside of car 12, it's this one that we are animating. And that one runs just fine. Again, JavaScript here to generate my CSS, which is injected into our page. How does it look like? Well, the key part is here our rotate cover animation. It says like, hey, start here, 0%. So when the image is sitting here at the very right, translate our image, translate it a bit, and then rotate it on the y-axis. So if you know 3D, this is the x-axis, the x and y. And if you rotate on the y-axis, it's doing a rotation like this. So we rotate it on the y-axis for 45 degrees, so that's a bit tilted. By the time it's at the center, we say rotate y, not 45 degrees, but 0 degrees, so it becomes visible. Then at 100%, we rotate a bit further, so it goes from here to here to here. And then also we do some translations, like to position to make them a bit more squishy. So this is the animation which is applied onto each and every image in there. The CSS itself, well, I didn't copy paste it in there. I just left it here. But how does it look like? Again, I've created a scroll timeline for each and every list item in there. We take a look at cards. That's the unordered list, so that's the wrapping element around it. And then we say, hey, start animating when the element is end 0. So when the element is sitting here, outside of the scroll container, and be done when it's at the start edge, again 0, not intersecting, so when it's sitting here on the left. Now, since we have a horizontal scroll timeline, we have a horizontal scrolling in there, and an horizontal orientation too. So we say like start when it's here at the right side of it and be finished when it's done. And this is the result. I also had like fiddled a bit with Z indexes in there, like to make the covers, like the frontmost cover, appear actually in the front. But yeah, I think that's pretty cool. There is one bug though. There is a huge bug in Chromium. They are going to fix it. They've acknowledged it, but it's here at the very start. So my card 0, the blue outline that you see here, it's halfway in the scroll container. So in my mind, I've made up the scroll timeline. I say, okay, when it's outside of it, be at 0% animation state, in the middle, 50%, and then when it's outside of the scroll port, 100% animation state. Well, these cards right here, they are all at 0% animation state, even though the element is already sitting halfway inside of its scroll container. So here, card 0 should actually be like frontmost, and then card 1 should be angled a bit, and card 2 more. So yeah, it's not really working. But then by the time maybe we reach card 5, everything is okay, because card 4 and 5 start outside of the scroll port and these behave correctly. So these first 3 here that are wrongly placed, that's a bug. It's being fixed, not as we speak, but it's being fixed. They will take it into account. Yeah, again, oh, some scroll snapping in there, like to make one cover sit in the front, and it's just me scrolling. You can also grab like the little scrubber. Cool stuff. When I built this demo, I was not really convinced about everything. Everything is possible with CSS. We don't need JavaScript. Then another demo. I think this is the last demo, or the second to last demo. I won't be bothering you that much longer. This is a stacking cards demo. Again, it is based upon another demo by somebody else. They use JavaScript for it. And what it does is like we have a card and we have another card. But when the card reaches the top, it sticks. But not only does it stick, it also moves like a bit to the back. And then the other card lays on top. And the other card sits on top again. And card number 4 up. And then when they form like one group, they slide out entirely. Scrolling down, scrolling up. Yeah, like this. Show debug. I have this blue box right here, this blue outline. This is the element that we're going to take a look at its position. Then we also have a slightly pink one in there. I don't know if you can see it. And then the green ones, these are the cards. And then when it sticks, we see that the whole pink box kind of sticks, and it's the green card, so the green content that is moved to the back. And then it works again. And what you also see here is that each and every card has been given like a small extra margin top, so that they don't overlap each other, but you can visually see them like a bit shifted down. CSS for all this Yeah, my responsive skills here are lacking on this page, but the CSS for this is, I've done a little trick right here. So I've done position sticky on each and every card, but then I've used the magic of CSS custom properties and calc to automatically like calculate which margin do you need and how long should the animation last, especially the animation, because if you take a look at card one here, it starts animating at the top and it lasts for this card and the other three to like one card, 2 cards, 3 cards, and then the animation stops. But if you take a look at the second card, the animation, it's a bit later. It doesn't start animating when you're at this position, it animates a bit later. So it here doesn't animate, but here it does start animating. And then it animates again for 2 cards, not for 3 cards. So 1 extra card and then another extra card. And then the third card here, the animation again is delayed a bit more. It's delayed by 2 cards. And then it only runs for like 1 card, the animation duration. And this is something that I've taken into account into the whole CSS. So each and every card, I've given them an index. Card 1 has index 1, card 2, index 2, and so forth. And then for every card, I like calculate like what is your 0-based index. So I just do -1. I can I edit this one? Oh no, I don't know. Yeah. So index 0, then reverse index. So it's not going from 1 to 4, but from 4 to 1. And then I use these variables, these CSS custom properties, to dynamically calculate the duration for each and every card. So our first card, it has a duration of the reverse index times 1 second. So card 1 has the reverse index of 3, so it lasts for 3 seconds, which is 3 cards. Because I've cheated a bit, I've set the time range of my animation to be, of my scroll timeline to be 4 seconds. I have 4 cards, so I just said 4 seconds, that's the most easy thing. Then my first card, it runs for 3 seconds. My second card, it animates for 2 seconds, but it is delayed by 1 second, 1 card at the top. My third card, it runs for 2 seconds and it's delayed for 2 seconds again. It runs for 1 second, delayed for 2 seconds, and then and so forth. So again, this is some CSS calc custom properties in there to make things easier. But yeah, I like the effect of this. Just CSS, no JavaScript. So is this the end of this presentation? Kind of is. One more thing. Yeah, 1 minute, folks, 1 minute. One more thing. There are several bugs filed at the several browser vendors. And if you want to see this feature land into one of those browsers, please upvote one of these bugs. So for Chromium, of course, well, there's no need to upvoting the issue because they already are working. Ooh, that's 1 minute too long. That should be better. So Chromium, they already are working on it. Firefox, they are not, and Safari, they aren't either. So if you do want to see this feature land inside of your browser, please put a star next to each and every item. And yes, this is really the ending of this presentation. My name is Bramus. I blog at bram.us. I'm on Twitter at Bramus. And I want to thank the organizers for having me.
Thank you.